Hello and welcome back to the IVF Daddies podcast. Today I have the amazing Emma the Embryologist on board, which is just fantastic. I'm so thrilled to have her here. We first met at a conference where I was beguiled by her amazing way of explaining things in a way that I could understand. So there we go.
Oh, wow. I hope
for 10 years.
Thank you for having me. I hope I'm not going to let you down with that introduction.
Hey, Emma the Embryologist, welcome. Yay. How are you doing?
I'm good, yes. Busy day. I've taken a day off work. Most people take a day off work and go and get a massage. I take a day off work and I have just been stood in front of 200 17-year-olds in a senior school talking about their reproductive health. My daughter's 11 now, so I do her school, and I did the girls, just the females. And then one of the girls in the last time I did it said, "Why are the boys not here?" And I thought that, my friend, is a very valid point. So I've just done it to 200 17-year-olds, both.
What did you talk about?
So the talk is, why did no one ever tell me this? Which is the biggest comment that I get when I sit in front of heterosexual couples that have been trying to conceive, solo mothers by choice that are of an advanced maternal age, or same-sex couples who don't really know what their options are. The same comment I get is, why did no one ever tell me this? So I stood in front of them and I said, this is the title of the talk. They start off really liking me because I talk about things like reproductive systems and penises, and we say penis a lot and everyone has a bit of a giggle. But ultimately it then goes into what causes infertility, and we talk about aging and all of those. But then we start talking quite a lot about what is causative. I talk about infertility in two things: what can you control and what can't you control. Actually, some things you can't, but it's to be aware of what those red flags are and when to seek help. Some things you can, and we can't all bury our heads in the sand when our 17-year-old selves are all vaping. Now we know a lot about vapes and smoking and all the detrimental effects of sperm health and all of that. So I sort of start off as their friend. And then we get towards the end of the talk where it says, what's worse? Don't smoke, don't vape. And they all go, oh, no. But at the end, the conversation is, why did no one? Well, I've told you. So do with the facts what you will, but at least you have the information.
Please share the presentation with us and we'll push it out.
Yeah, it's a good one. It works really well. And what I love about it is you can sit in these schools now are so different to probably when we went to school. They've all got these amazing lecture theatres and the proper places where you can go and you're not all just shoved in a classroom. And actually you can visibly see these light bulbs coming on in their heads. And it is just magical watching them just go, my God, it's just brilliant. So that was my day off. How was yours?
And of course, you're now here, so educating a whole bunch of people, which is great. I think that's one of the things in life, right? Why are we never taught about infertility? Why are we never taught about how to file your taxes and like running a bank account? Like, these are life skills that we don't ever get taught, and you just have to figure it out. I was talking to somebody last week. She said that she had gonorrhea and didn't know about it. That has now affected her.
So we talked about that today because we talked about the causative factors. A lot of people sit in front of me with tubal damage from something that happened to them 20 years ago, like a silent chlamydia disease. And so I then just basically, it's basic maths. I put up a slide and say, okay, guys, how do we stop ourselves getting sexually transmitted diseases? And they just all look so ashamed. And I'm like, it's really simple. It's called condoms. I think we all know what they are. We just need to use them. When you start to relate that back to what that is going to potentially do for their future and their future selves, I think it becomes it is really massive, and they get it. It's about sitting in front of these kids and telling them the facts. These are 17-year-olds. They're mostly having sex, or they're going to be very soon. Let's just accept that and educate them.
Yeah. Well, it's the same with PrEP, right? So PrEP, when I was a teenager, wasn't around, and now it is. And you've got a lot of gay men using PrEP to, in theory, avoid getting HIV. And therefore, they're not using condoms. Therefore, what are we seeing? A rise in STIs.
Exactly.
Just
because it's protecting you against potentially one thing, but it's all the other things that we like. The barrier method is... Anyway, so that was fun. Maybe I'm a bit weird, but I quite enjoy it.
We love weird because you know what? I'm really weird too. So I went yesterday to see I was invited by a scientific group to look at some of the stuff they're doing with embryos. I was in my element because I don't come from a medical or a scientific background. I studied it at school. I loved it. Then went into finance and had kids and fell into this. Looking under a microscope at eggs, it was mind-blowing, amazingly fascinating. And maybe hopefully in your talks to schools, you're sparking an interest in people to get into this. What is this? Who is Emma, the embryologist?
I know, it's a mouthful. I didn't pick a great brand name, did I? It's a mouthful. Who am I? I'm an embryologist by trade. I've been an embryologist for 23 years. I started in the NHS in London. I then took my career into one of the biggest fertility clinics in the UK, where I spent 13 years. I had my own very difficult road to parenthood during that time. What happened, very much like you, Richard, it's like you have these, you become a parent and you definitely change your perspective on certain things that matter and don't matter and all of that. And I realized what really mattered to me after this 13 years in a really big clinic. An embryologist is the person responsible for the eggs and the sperm and creating the embryos that help you have IVF, freeze your eggs, freeze your sperm. Anything that involves an egg and a sperm outside of the human body is what an embryologist is doing. We can pause at the egg and then create embryos. We can genetically test embryos. We're quite clever. We're also quite handy and dexterous with our hands, but we're also very scientific. So we're always about what causes infertility, what can we do to help the journey, all of that. So that's an embryologist. And when you're in a big clinic, that can feel a little bit like being on a conveyor belt, because instead of getting to know the patient, you can just be knee deep in 15 egg collections a day. You might not come up for air. I realized after my own pretty awful road to having my two beautiful children that I wanted to be a bit more of a support network for patients. I had all this knowledge and I was like, oh my God, I've got all this knowledge in my head about what's right, what's wrong, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. The patients deserve to have a level of insight so that they can make informed decisions. So I left the big clinic and I went to where I am now, which is the IVF Fertility Group, where actually the whole ethos is we are small by design. The idea of being small by design is that we never actually have so many patients in the building that we can't do that individualized care in fertility treatment wherever we are. We end up getting big and we end up trying to get patients to fit into protocols rather than getting protocols to fit to patients. People are different. Everyone's got different needs. Why are they in front of you? What do they want? What are their family goals? I realised that actually it needed to be small. I had this unbelievable passion to just start talking at people like you. So here we are. I'm still an embryologist. I still work full-time. I'm a laboratory director now. I've got a team of 14 embryologists that I look after who are all absolutely epic humans. I love my team. I'll be honest, we recruited by passion rather than skill. I can teach you skill. I can't teach you what's within. So the whole team's very much in the ethos of patient first, like trying to explain stuff, making sure they're on the journey. Thankfully, the IVF have been completely supportive of this inherent need I've had to talk at anyone that will listen. And here we are.
A bit like me. In fact, that was why I wrote this. Yeah,
Exactly.
These are the twins. They don't look like this anymore. But that's the thing. It's that passion, that internal desire to help people who don't know what they don't know. It's like, how are you going to ask a question if you don't even know the answer? You're asking the question.
Yeah. And you don't know why you're asking it. So to even formulate an answer in your head, that's what we do, right? So help you understand it.
Let's tuck into bed. Do you remember back in the day?
You could have them under the duvets, a bit like the breakfast that used to be on Channel 4 in the UK.
Right?
Yeah.
Can we do that? Should we do that? Let's do one of those. For those of you listening, sorry, we've gone on a tangent, but we're going to bring it back.
Great idea.
So one of my things that I understand now, but really I find quite annoying, if I'm brutally honest, is success rates. People quote success rates left, right, and center. Look at us, we've got 100% success rate. As an embryologist, as a lab director, as somebody who is involved in this, can you explain a bit about success rates?
It's such an untapped topic and it infuriates me to the core of what you've just said, that someone is able to put something on a website and say they've got 99% success rates, but not have to tell you that's from 2 cases. You've won 2 things. What's the N number? For anyone that knows anything about science, the N number is the number of cases you're talking about. And it has to have weighting. But I think what I would really love to break down is the difference in the way it's presented in success rates, because what patients are doing when they're looking at fertility clinics, because that's what we're here for, is like some people see on a success rate pregnancy rate per embryo transfer. So we're talking about how many positive tests did you get from the transfer events done in that clinic. And my question is, of course that's going to be high. And why do we care? We didn't go there for a positive test on a urine stick. We went there for a baby, for a family. So by putting stats out like that and presenting it as pregnancy rate per embryo transfer, why would you, as a normal Joe Blogs on the street, understand that that is not a baby? That for me is, we've put an embryo back, or 6, because it doesn't tell you how many embryos they put back either, and we've got a positive test. Well done. But the point is, that is not a success rate. That is not the success rate you went to that clinic for. And also, my really big, deep thing that I think we should get into is, what is success? Because actually, for me, the ultimate success is you having the family you always dreamed of. And that doesn't even mean having the baby. That means being so well looked after that you are able to create your family unit that you always dreamed of before. Are they having the right conversations with you to build that family? So the ultimate success needs to be brought back to all the successes that need to happen for you to achieve that ultimate success. I believe success is even having a nice GP that knows where to direct you and tells you at 6 months of trying, let's get you some tests, and doesn't send you away for 6 months so you're getting older. For me, that is a success.
So would you go back to your primary care physician, your GP, the first person you're talking to, or your mum or your dad, or somebody going, this doesn't sound right, therefore putting you on a trajectory that leads you to an outcome?
So that for me is success. Me walking into that school today could be the difference between a successful outcome for these kids and not, because I might have just given them the education they need to know what they need to do. So there is so much success that has to happen for you to be in a position where you even appear in those statistics on those websites. And let's break that down. So you walk in a fertility clinic and have treatment. The female providing the eggs is stimulated with drugs to create eggs in the follicle. If that works, that's a successful part. And we need to be really clear that at everything I'm going to talk about over the next steps, some people don't make it through. So some people will not have a successful stimulation, will never make it to egg collection. What stats do they fall into? Right?
Do they ever appear anywhere?
No. And if your clinic is underperforming, they might have lots of those patients because they're not doing a very good job from day one. But they're not being governed by that. They're not being judged by it because no one's publishing it. So my next success rate is that you go to egg collection and it's done at the right time. So you get a good number of eggs and those eggs are mature. Mature being that they are capable of being fertilized. Success number 2, you've got eggs from the patient and you've got mature eggs because you've done the stimulation properly and it's worked. There are people that go and have an egg collection, it fails, and then we don't have mature eggs to use in the lab. They're not in a success rate anyway. They're not any story. They're just people that have started treatment and it's not progressed. They're not on a website. They're not published. No one's talking about it. But these are massive failures for these people. They've got to start again. Then I get into the really good bit, which I get really passionate about, because these are the lab success rates. So lab success rates are, we all work off in the Europe and actually the US as well, but probably different. It's called something different. We work off of something called the Vienna consensus, which is success based on stages that go towards creating embryos. So let's start with fertilization rates. And we're all judged on these, and we do actually have to submit these to the regulator. You have a competent success rate clinic and you have a benchmark success rate clinic on all the stages that make embryos. So stuff like fertilization rate with ICSI. In one clinic, that is 65%. Now that's acceptable. In my clinic, it's 85%. So as we go through this, Richard, I'm going to run some numbers. So we've collected 12 eggs from this woman. And in a really good clinic, 11 of those are mature. In another clinic, 8 of those are mature.
Just to jump, so I'm going to do lots of interrupting.
That's fine.
How do you get them to be mature?
So a lot of it's to do with the protocol. A lot of it's to do with how long someone is stimulated, how well they are stimulated, how well they are monitored, when that trigger is given. Some things you can change, some things you can't. Some women have low maturity of eggs. But as an overall ballpark, we expect 80 to 90% of eggs to be mature from the follicle if it all goes according to plan.
The immature eggs are discarded?
Yeah, they're discarded. So you've suddenly collected 12 eggs. Yes, episode 2. So you've got 12 eggs from both your ladies in 2 different clinics. And then in this lady, she's got 11 mature eggs and this lady's got 8. So she's got 11 chances at fertilization already and she's got 8. They've got different success rates already. You then fertilize those eggs in the 2 different clinics. I've got an 85% success rate, so I'd hopefully get 9 fertilized embryos. And in this clinic over here, we've got maybe a 65, which, by the way, like I said, is completely acceptable. It's in the margins. It's very much what we call our competent clinic success rates. But suddenly this lady here has got 9 fertilized embryos, and this lady here has got 5 or 6. Okay. So then we go into our embryo funnel, which I know you love talking about more than anything, is how many embryos off the back of those fertilizations, how many of those make viable embryos? So a viable embryo to me is an embryo that has the capabilities of making you pregnant and being transferred at what is called the blastocyst stage. Now, in the clinic I sit within, we are a benchmark clinic. So you've got your 9 fertilized embryos. I would expect 4 or 5 of those. I'm talking ballpark. There are obviously circumstances where this doesn't work because of fertility issues that are very complex. But overall, I'm expecting around 50% of those embryos to reach the blastocyst stage because the culture conditions are optimal. We use time lapse, it's uninterrupted, and we're really good at our jobs. So we would expect 4 or 5 blastocysts in this clinic. In the other clinic, where you've got your 5 or 6 fertilized embryos, and then you've got a conversion rate of 30%, you've suddenly got 1 blastocyst. Let's play out the scenario where this patient has the potential to fall into the statistics you see on the website, because only people that have embryos to transfer are able to get pregnant. Pregnancy rate per embryo transferred, however you present it, I absolutely think it should be live birth per embryo transferred, because that's what we are trying to create as families.
The ultimate is to walk away with a baby.
This patient here didn't get any embryos. She's not in those success rates because she doesn't have an embryo to transfer. The ones you see on the website are only the cases where the couples, the females, however it comes to it, the egg donor that has had an embryo to transfer. And there's this whole heap of success that has to go on in the lab before you're even in the statistics that sit on a website.
So as a layperson, this is what I now struggle with. It's like, how do you even know that? You don't, right? You're just going on, well, these guys are this. I have a friend that went there. Like, they never give you data, right? You just have to go with the part where you've got an embryo and then we're going to be using it. That's the data you're using.
Yeah. And so when you're looking for a clinic, quite understandably so, you're looking at, okay, I'm 37. Look, this clinic's got an amazing success rate and live birth outcome at the age of 37. And that's fine if 90% of people are getting there. But what if only 50% of people are getting there? To the point where they're actually in those statistics. And this for me, I don't have the answer. I hope that anyone that's now listening halfway through the podcast thinks I'm going to give you this miraculous magic tool. I'm really sorry. This is going to really upset you. I don't have the answer. My point is, like sitting in front of the kids in the school, this is about delivering facts. You have this massive light bulb moment that not all 37-year-olds in that clinic are going to be in those statistics, because there's going to be a group of them that never actually made an embryo to go in it. The point is, those are the questions we need to have. Those are the realities we need to face. And it comes back to me, in the UK and Europe, we call it the Vienna consensus. What are the KPIs in the lab? KPIs standing for key performance indicators. How much success is happening to make sure I get an embryo? Actually, my question a lot of the time is, what do you think my chances are of creating embryos in your setting?
Say that again.
What do you think my chances are of being able to create viable embryos in your setting that can allow me to get into those success rates that you publish on your website?
That's powerful.
I find it, and why should you be thinking about this? But I am.
We assume that people are on our side and they're looking after us, and these are doctors and nurses and embryologists, and they're going to be telling us what we need to know. And I always say to anybody, don't assume. Come to the podcast and we'll give you the questions to ask. This is exactly what I want to get out of today. Here are 2 or 3 questions that you need to ask when you are talking to that team. I love that.
The first question I think I would always ask, and I think I did this on my Instagram, was 10 questions, probably a bit too intense, but hey, that's me. I'm nice and intense. The first question is actually, will you treat me? And the reason that's always my first question is because a lot of the way that clinics all over the world get really high success rates is they will actually filter out the really poor prognosis patients in the early stages. We know that as women age, or as their AMH drops, as your AMH drops below sort of 3 or 4, you are really challenging. It's a challenging situation to be in. It's about having really honest conversations that we are definitely going to struggle more to get you into those success rates you appear on the website, because we're actually going to start off with a pool of eggs that is quite small. So to tackle that, some clinics just won't treat people with low AMHs because
AMHs,
anti-Müllerian hormone. So it tells me as a clinician, or it tells the clinician roughly how many eggs we can hope to achieve given your circumstances. Ultimately, the number of eggs we can get from you is the top of my embryo funnel. So the top of the bit where I sort of go into that reverse pyramid and start talking about all the drop-off that happens with embryo development. And there are clinics that won't treat patients with AMHs or low ovarian reserves because ultimately that affects their success rates they put on the website. So my first question that I think everyone should be asking is, will you treat me with my demographic, with my personal circumstance? Will you treat me? Secondly, can I have context-driven ideas of what my chances look like so I can make informed decisions?
So that leads me to a question of, you go into a clinic, you're 42, will you treat me? And the clinic says yes, because it's the right thing to do. But they know that's ultimately going to affect their success rate. So potentially they have a lower success rate at the end of it because they're doing the right thing by taking you on board.
I stand there as one of those clinics and take that hit. But as that person in that clinic that takes that hit, I don't believe it is a hit because it's the right thing to do. Equally, what infuriates me is that you are then seen as lesser because your numbers don't match the others. And that's something that we just have to live with. And it is the right thing to do. Not only will you treat me, will you have a discussion with me about my family goals? I might be 42, but I really did have this dream of 2 children. Is that possible? How are we going to get there? And not just, let's put some embryos back and make you pregnant and then leave you desiring a sibling in 2 years' time when it's almost impossible at 44 to try and attain that. Are you going to listen to me? If you are going to offer me treatment, let's be really honest about how that looks. I think all of this is about just managing and allowing people to not be misled into the purchasing of IVF life. It's about, okay, this is your IMH, this is the amount of eggs we're going to get. Given that amount of eggs, what does our data tell us? I've got data for 1 egg, 2 egg, 3 eggs, 4 eggs, all the way up. Just for anyone that's listening, the tipping point, the sweet point seems to be around 6 or 7 eggs. After that, you get some really good, solid success rates. Under that, we're in interesting territory about what that drop-off looks like and how many people then don't have embryos to fit into that statistic on the website. I think it's really reasonable to have those conversations.
I love that. So what you're saying is, will you treat me? What are my family goals? And my personal situation, how does that fit into the family goals, given your experience in this field?
In this clinic, with your success rates, with your laboratory KPIs, all of that thing. And I think these are really valid, like I said, it's just knocking on the head the idea that the success rate you see on the website does not represent, I guarantee you it doesn't represent at least 20% of the people that walk through the door. Because even in top performing clinics, you can't get an embryo from every single patient that walks. You just can't. That is why we are so infertile as a human race. Some people don't want to hear it. I get it. It's really upsetting. But it's more upsetting when you realise you could have been told it and you weren't.
And you've spent X amount of money and you spent X amount of time and X amount of emotion and you're with nothing. What is, for me, probably one of the hardest conversations I'm ever having is, this may not work for you. How do you deal with that?
I think it depends why. Why are we saying it's not going to work? And I think it may not work for you. Is it? It may not work with your own biological gametes. Is that a conversation? That's quite a significant different conversation to, this is not going to work and you can never be pregnant yourself, because then you've got to have, I think a lot of it comes from the doctors. I definitely have had some really difficult conversations over the last couple of years when it's come from the embryos, and it's about, it's probably genetically based or genetically led. But I think it's about also being, as a clinic, being really confident and okay with the fact and doing the right ethical thing is to say, I'm really sorry, we can't offer you treatment, because that would be the wrong thing to do, given what we know. These are the options. And actually being the person that says, no.
Right, we can't do it because of X, Y, and Z. You're not open to interpretation. You're literally saying, these are the reasons why. Back to the whole success of the clinic. That, in effect, is also a way to say to them, okay, it wasn't the outcome you wanted. Here are other choices that we can give you, which could lead to that family goal. You want 2 children, maybe there's an egg donor or a sperm donor, or you wanted to be pregnant and you can't, therefore here's a surrogate. Your family, the dream that you have is still there. It's just achievable in a different way.
Supporting that person with those counselling, whatever that move is. But actually, I think it's incredibly powerful to be in a clinic that is willing and ethically responsible enough to say, no, on this level for this reason, and this is what we're going to do. Because I think deep down, obviously all patients are desperate for the end goal. But actually, when you've been through this for many years, some of the desperation comes from someone giving you a clear level of closure, being able to move on and not dangling the carrot anymore. And I think that is patient care. 100% patient care. Being the person that allows that person to grieve whatever that path was before we move on to another path. I think you allow them to grieve and close that chapter rather than keep it going.
Well, we had a conversation with one of our doctors who was like, you need to grieve for the child that you wanted, and you need to be open to have the child you're going to have. And that grief process is brutal because it's a dream.
Exactly.
It's taken away.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's very real to people when they sit in front of you with that dream. I just think it comes back to the same word, doesn't it? Being responsible, being open, being transparent. Let's face it, success rates are what they are. And not a lot of people are like what I'm going to say, but it's fact. This is the fact. I would love people to, after listening to this, look at those success rates on the website and understand there's so much more about it than just what number they have chosen for you to see. It presents a number that is probably their favourite one.
Marketing ploy.
Marketing. I saw an amazing one the other day that said something like 70% pregnancy rate, and then it was in a tiny little thing, and like we just said, it was positive test. And I know that from positive test to baby, depending on how you're getting there, whether those are unscreened embryos, screened embryos, PGTA tested, there is a potential 15% loss in all pregnancies. We know that any female over the age of 35 using unscreened embryos, miscarriage of any description is 1 in 3, 1 in 4. So it feels really misleading to put a statistic that's so huge up there.
Little print underneath.
It really upsets me because, like you, I've lived a very different but difficult road to parenthood, and I know how misleading those numbers are.
You put every single bit of hope and dreams into looking at that and going, this is going to be me. Yeah. Okay, wow. So let's end on a positive note. Another top, I hope that's red wine. Please tell me it's red wine.
Squash. It's 2 over.
Can we literally do an interview in bed with a glass of red wine?
Yeah, let's do that too.
I love that. Give me one more really powerful question that people can ask when they walk into a clinic.
Oh, what was my other one? Will you treat me? Is the other one I've got. Do you know what? You've just plucked my head and it's just gone.
Talking about wine, that's what it was.
No, I know. I love wine. So I think how will you support me? Is one of my other ones. Is what, how are we going to communicate? How are you going to support me? All of those things feel very, very powerful. What would you say? That was a good question.
Well, I think absolutely. Who is going to be the team around me? Is there going to be open and clear communication? Is there going to be empathy? Is there going to be somebody that I can call when there's something that's not going, or send a message to that gets back to me? Because I think one of the things that I hear a lot is I sent a message and then 3 days later somebody replied. That's 3 days of spiraling. 3 days of what is going on? Is it me? Is it this? I lived this, and I know that when I had a question, I was always, why? And then the answer reply. And sometimes actually what really bothered me was when they're like, oh, we'll tell you when you need to know. I'm like, oh, I'm asking you because I want to know now, not in the future. But I think team is really important. That team around you, they become your support network. Yeah, because also who are you going to see in each cycle and all of that? I know another one for me is when you are looking at those success rates on websites, when you interrogate those success rates, if you see something that says outcome per embryo transfer, which is the event, my question to a clinic is, what is your multiple birth rate? Because if someone has got a really high multiple birth rate, it means they're putting multiple embryos back to achieve high success rates. And that, in my personal opinion, is not patient care, because as we know, you are so blessed. You have twins. They are brilliant, but twins are a difficult pregnancy. Triplets are a difficult pregnancy. Higher order multiples are a difficult pregnancy. And we are in a space now, many years down the line, that we are utilising one embryo at a time to make sure that the pregnancies are healthy and straightforward and come as complicated as little. That also means you take a hit in your success rates. Because
that's
you're doing
another
a
question.
single embryo transfer, and maybe it takes, maybe it doesn't. If you do two, you can double that chance, right?
Well, you can definitely increase it, right? When you are looking at statistics that don't talk about per embryo transferred, as in how many are going back, my question to that is how many of those are multiple pregnancies? Because if it's sitting above sort of 6, 7, 8%, then you definitely are utilizing more embryos than you need to. And also then the flip side of that is how many of your transfer events are single embryo transfer events. For me, that should be well over 90 in the clinics. So that's a really key one to try and understand or interrogate the statistics a bit better.
Emma, the embryologist, the expert from the Eve world. God, that alliteration is phenomenal. Thank you very much, my love. You are phenomenal.
Thank you.
And we will definitely have you back on.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. We'll talk soon. Bye. Thank you for listening.